Hi everyone, and welcome back to Difference Frames the World, a channel to view the world from a different perspective. Here is Clara again, and today, we are diving into one of the biggest political storms to hit East Asia this month, a clash that's sending shockwaves through Tokyo, Beijing, and far beyond. It all started with a few sentences spoken inside Japan's Diet. Just a few words from Sanae Takaichi, Japan's first female prime minister, and suddenly, we have a major diplomatic clash, criticism from within Japan's own political establishment, and the kind of rhetorical escalation that policymakers usually try very hard to avoid. 2 days ago, we also posted a video discussing the issue, so we will not elaborate on the details of what happened. Please refer to the previous video if you are interested, and the link to that video is in the pinned comments. In this episode, we will discuss why it matters and what this could mean for the future of Japan-China relations and regional stability. Let's start with the moment that set the whole thing off, a brief recap. On November 7, Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi responded to a question in Parliament about a hypothetical Taiwan crisis. And she said, very clearly, that if a Taiwan contingency involved the deployment of warships or the use of force, it could qualify as a survival-threatening situation for Japan, which means the Japanese SDF could send its troops there. Be careful, as the phrase survival-threatening situation is not to be taken lightly. The same words were employed when the Japanese invaders attacked the Chinese army on September 18, 1931, and started the 14-year-long war between China and Japan. Under Japan's post-2015 security laws, a survival-threatening situation is a legally defined trigger. It allows Japan's self-defense forces to support allies, such as the United States, in a conflict even if Japan itself hasn't been attacked. Taiwan is not Japan's ally, but it has connections with the United States, which has significant influence over Japan. Despite its formal diplomatic ties with Beijing, Washington has never promised to abandon Taiwan in the event of a crisis across the strait. America's former dementia leader even wanted to defend Taiwan in defiance of the White House's eager denial. Japan's prime ministers in the past have always danced around this exact point. They would imply things, hint at things, but stop short of saying it out loud. Takaichi, however, said it outright. And she doubled down again on November 10, insisting she stands by her words and sees no need to retract anything. That alone would have raised eyebrows. But then came the backlash. The former Prime Minister, Ishiba, her predecessor, delivered a blunt critique on a radio program. In his view, Takaichi's words are essentially identical to declaring, a Taiwan contingency is an existential crisis for Japan. Historically, Japanese leaders have avoided saying this explicitly because it can be interpreted as a promise, or even a threat, to intervene in a Taiwan-related conflict. Ishiba warned that drawing such clear lines doesn't necessarily strengthen deterrence. In fact, it could corner Japan diplomatically or worsen regional tensions. Meanwhile, and unsurprisingly, Beijing was furious. China's foreign ministry accused Japan of violating the One China principle, undermining the political foundation of China-Japan relations, interfering in domestic affairs, and breaking commitments made in key bilateral documents. China summoned Japan's ambassador and issued a sharp warning, either retract the remarks or bear the consequences. It is a little ironical that the Japanese leader just shook hands with Chinese President Xi Jinping like friends a week before she uttered such rhetoric. So that's the setup, a few words in the Diet, followed by a diplomatic firestorm. Now, let's examine why those words struck such a raw nerve, and why they triggered such a huge reaction. It isn't just about a sentence or two, rather, this is about decades of carefully managed ambiguity being suddenly thrown out the window. First, Japan broke from its traditional vagueness. Even though many people in Japan's defense community privately believe Japan cannot sit out a Taiwan crisis, Japanese leaders have always spoken ambiguously. It's strategic. They keep the door open without committing themselves publicly. Takaichi's comments broke that tradition. She said them inside the Diet on the record. Not just publicly but permanently. Her stupidity will be remembered not for days, but for years to come. She tied Taiwan to Japan's survival threat legal category, doing so as a sitting prime minister, not a retired statesman. For Beijing, that not only crossed a line, but also tore open a historical scar. Second, the legal meaning is enormous. When she talked about a survival-threatening situation, it was horrifying. She was discussing the activation of one of the most consequential aspects of Japan's security legislation, which has real military implications. She meant Japan's collective self-defense, supporting U.S. military action, and expanding SDF operations outside Japan. Third, history looms large. For China, Taiwan isn't just a geopolitical issue, it's an emotional one, tied to memories of Japanese colonization from 1895 to 1945. Chinese statements immediately referenced World War II, the anti-Japanese war, as well as Taiwan's restoration in 1945, which both the Chinese mainland and Taiwan celebrate every year. So when a Japanese leader speaks publicly about linking Taiwan to Japan, China hears echoes of the past. Fourth, Taiwan is strategically vital to Japan. The distance from Taiwan to Okinawa is shorter than the distance between Tokyo and Osaka. Okinawa, formerly the Ryukyu Kingdom, was once an independent maritime state before 1879. On the internet, some netizens occasionally call for the independence of Okinawa from Japan, asserting that the Ryukyu Islands are not legally part of Japan. However, the United States returned the administration rights to Japan in 1972 under the San Francisco Peace Treaty, which China firmly rejects. Taiwan's proximity to Okinawa is a significant concern for Japan, and Taiwan is also vital because trade routes, energy shipping lanes, and semiconductor supply chains all pass through this corridor. Many Japanese strategists quietly believe that if Taiwan falls under the Beijing's force, Japan's own security environment will shift dramatically. Takaichi said this out loud, which caused the diplomatic explosion. Regarding her remarks, criticism came from inside and outside Japan. Shigeru Ishiba's criticism wasn't just a personal opinion inside the Japanese political circle. It reflects a deeper divide within Japan's political class. Some politicians support a more assertive security stance, while others fear the consequences of abandoning ambiguity. Takaichi, however, held firm, signaling this isn't a slip of the tongue, but an intentional part of her policy worldview. Beijing's reaction was immediate. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian condemned her remarks as dangerous and provocative. Japan's ambassador was summoned for a formal protest. China's Vice Foreign Minister Sun Weidong issued one of the strongest warnings Beijing has delivered to Tokyo in years. China accused Japan of violating post-war commitments, encouraging Taiwan independence, disrupting regional stability, and interfering in internal affairs. It was not a routine diplomatic drama. It was a serious escalation. On the island, analysts recognized the significance of Japan's stronger rhetoric in increasing Chinese pressure on Taiwan. Alex Tsai, a notable critic in Taiwan, ridiculed her remarks, saying she would not shed tears until she saw the coffin, and she was doomed to see it. It originated from a Chinese idiom, which suggests that one is unwilling to face reality and will bear the bitter consequences. Global media quickly zeroed in on this as a major shift. If Japan changes its Taiwan policy, even rhetorically, the entire geopolitical balance in East Asia changes with it. Now let's dig into the deeper currents driving this conflict. The historical layer is utmost when discussing relations between Tokyo, Beijing, and Taipei. Beijing frequently references Japan's colonization of Taiwan from 1895 to 1945, as well as post-war treaties like the Cairo and Potsdam Declarations, and the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Second World War, all of which remind Japan of its historical responsibility. The strategic layer cannot be ignored when we analyze the Japanese Prime Minister's rhetoric. Japan's security environment is shifting due to China's military growth, the strategic rivalry between Beijing and Washington, and new vulnerabilities in the First Island chain. Some Japanese strategists believe a change in Taiwan's status would directly endanger Japan. Takaichi's remarks mirror this strategic logic. Japan's domestic political layer is also important. Takaichi herself is known for uttering conservative nationalist views and supporting constitutional revision. She made multiple visits to Yasukuni Shrine, a place that honors many A-class war criminals. To Beijing, She represents a political trend they find deeply concerning, a Japan that is more willing to assert its military presence and national pride. Where could this clash lead? Let's look at what might happen next. Short term, relations cool further. Beijing demanded a retraction. Takaichi refused to take back what she said. We can expect persistent diplomatic friction and possible economic retaliation, as well as increased military activity near Japan in the near future. Medium term, Taiwan becomes more tied to Japan's security doctrine, which may advance Beijing's military takeover if the Taiwanese authorities make dangerous moves. As Japan hosts 70% of U.S. military bases in Okinawa, which is merely 110 kilometers away from Taiwan, Japan will have tighter integration with U.S. contingency planning. In the United States, the mainstream opinion about Taiwan has not changed significantly, and many still believe they can influence Taiwan's future, which could lead to a severe conflict across the strait between the world's two superpowers. China needs to make preparations for the worst-case scenario. Long-term, a strategic turning point in Asia. We could see a more assertive Japan and a more defensive and reactive China. Countries in the region will need to make new alignments in the so-called Indo-Pacific and reshape the security architecture of the first island chain. It could be a key moment historians look back on years from now. Even though Beijing stresses constantly that Taiwan is its internal affairs, it's a global flashpoint, not a simply local issue. A Taiwan crisis involving Japan would instantly draw in the United States. That's a major power confrontation. As we analyzed in the previous video, the US wants to use Japan as the next Ukraine to contain China. Beijing should be very cautious when making decisions. A military conflict is the last thing to expect until it is necessary. Taiwan produces the world's most advanced semiconductors. Any instability threatens global supply chains. Japan, the US and China are among the world's largest economies. Any friction is disastrous to the world's stability and security. Some Westerners assert that Beijing never ruled the island and still claims its sovereignty, which is not true. Before the Japanese seized it from the Qing dynasty, the Chinese had owned Taiwan for hundreds of years, dating back to the Yuan dynasty. The fact that the Japanese colonized Taiwan for 50 years is a historical wound that still shapes foreign policy decisions today. And Taiwan sits right at the intersection of those narratives. It is worth noting that the brother of Taiwan's former leader, Lee Teng-hui, has a Japanese name, Iwasato Takenori. During World War II, he served in the Imperial Japanese Navy and died in 1945 in the Philippines, Manila, during military action. After his death, he was enshrined at Yasukuni Shrine in Japan, which honors those who died in service, including many Taiwanese conscripts. In the eyes of some Taiwan independence elements, Japan is psychologically and emotionally closer than the Chinese mainland. Sanae Takaichi's comments may have lasted only a few seconds, but the political and diplomatic aftershocks are still spreading. One thing is certain, it was not just a diplomatic spat, it was a turning point. The world's troublemaker is shifting its focus from Europe to Asia.